Hey guys, welcome to Code Decode. In this video, we are going to cover some top scenario based microservices interview questions. Nowadays, the interviews are not that straightforward like we used to have. They are not going to ask you what is circuit breaker design pattern, what is Saga design pattern. These are not how the questions are asked right now. They are more trickier, they are more turned around and twisted around, and that's how they trick you into the situations and conditions. And then you have to answer with all your prior knowledge. How would you fix that particular scenario, or how would you implement the design patterns in that particular scenario? So let's get started and see few of the questions that have been recently asked in microservices interview questions. So first is based on the service communications and data consistencies. This is a very high overview or the broader topic. The questions that are asked around this questions or the topic is, if you have multiple microservices like A, B, and C, they are communicating synchronously via REST APIs. For example, in the banking services or the payments that we are taking, these are all synchronous calls, right? So if you're using REST and the synchronous communication, if a service in the middle of the request chain fails, for example, A connected to B, connected to C, if B fails, then how would you handle the failure recovery and ensure the data consistency? So the basic question is, if out of A, B, and C, B fails, how you would still manage to send a response through A to the client. So if a microservice in the middle of synchronous communication chain fails, the failure recovery can be handled using resilience patterns. So this is how they tricked you into getting you into the circuit breaker design patterns. Though circuit breaker is not the only option, we have multiple more options like retry with exponential backs off and everything. So let's see how we can do that. So it is always better you give them the options that this is what you can implement, this is what we can implement. Based on the scenario, we can choose the best out of these. Hey guys, recently we have launched a course covering an end-to-end full stack application using Angular as front end and microservices and Spring Boot as the back end. Also, we have used Cloud to deploy this application, and we have used CI/CD, that is Jenkins and Argo CD, for continuous integration and continuous deployment. The technologies that we have used is REST, RESTful web services, Spring Boot and microservices for backend, Angular for front end. GitHub we have used for version control system. Also, to make the code unit testable, we have used JUnits. We have used Sonar for code quality checks. Also, for containerization, we have used Docker and Kubernetes. And to deploy this whole application, we have used AWS and multiple services from AWS. Also, we have used SQL as well as NoSQL, that is MongoDB and SQL. On AWS, since for the SQL we have RDS, we have used those services, and Jenkins and Argo CD for CI/CD pipeline. Also, this is an architecture of the application that we have created where the front end is Angular and the back end is microservices. We have used ALB load balancers, Ingress for routing and load balancing, and we have used SQL and MongoDB for SQL and NoSQL DB management with Eureka Server and all those microservices counterparts. Now this is the CI/CD pipeline. This is the CI/CD flowchart for the application that we have created on local. So this is something, a flow when you create an application in local, push it to GitHub, create a Jenkins pipeline, and do the CI/CD using Jenkins and Argo CD. And at the end, deploy the whole code at AWS EKS. Complete description of this course is covered in a very separate video. The link for that video is also given in the description bar below. And also the link to purchase that course from Udemy is also in the description bar below. So please go and check the description for all these links. So the very first is the circuit breaker design pattern. As soon as you get something around the resilience, you go for circuit breaker design patterns. So circuit breaker design patterns prevents the system from repeatedly calling a failed service. So out of A calling B, calling C. If B is failing again and again, there is no use of giving a call to B again and again. Otherwise, it will lead to even further slowdown in the response to the client. Too much of theory. Let's give you a real-time example, okay? So in simple terms, a circuit breaker is like a safety switch that you always have in your home also, right? That prevents it from repeatedly trying to do something that is failing, which could make the situation even worse. Imagine you are trying to plug an application into socket, appliance into socket, but the socket keeps on sparking or failing. If you want to keep it plugged in, it could even cause the damage to your appliance. So for example, for an AC, you are trying to plug into a socket, but socket is giving you a spark. It will give not only a damage to your application appliance like AC, but also to your life also. So what circuit breaker will do is it cut off the power for the socket temporarily until the socket is fine again. This gives the system to recover before you try again switching your AC into the socket. In this way, also in the similar way, in the microservice architecture, a circuit breaker monitors the call between multiple services like A calling B, B calling C, C calling D. If one of the service, say B, is failing or it is too slow or unavailable, then circuit breaker opens and stops the system to give a call repeatedly to your B's microservice. This helps in overloading the failing microservice and gives you time to recover. Because nowadays everything is in Kubernetes and in pods, it will give time for pod to restart. The crashing pod will always be able to restart if there is no technical issue into it. So once the service seems to be working fine and pod is up again, after a particular timeout or the check, the circuit breaker again closes the system and the system can try calling the service again. So that's the beauty of circuit breaker design pattern. Now, what is the tool to implement it? You can use Resilience Forge's circuit breaker to monitor and failures and temporarily stop calling the B microservice which was failing. How do you implement it? Use the iterate circuit breaker on the particular order service. Also give the fallback method. So if order service fails multiple times, the circuit breaker opens up and gives the further calls will stop going forward. Once the order service recovers or the pod for the order service comes up healthy, the circuit breaker closes after particular check, or there's a health check going between the circuit breaker patterns and the microservice. If it is now found healthy, then only it closes and allows the traffic again to A to B to C, otherwise it will stop going to B. And if B has the proper fallback mechanism, it says that the order service is unavailable, you can still browse through your products, the product catalog page. The second way is usually used in conjunction always. You can use the retry mechanism for temporary failures. So as said, most of the applications nowadays uses Docker Kubernetes to be deployed on the pod as the containers. Now the pod has the tendency to keep on dying every now and then. None of the pod will be able to live lifelong. So if the failure is intermittent, that is pod is down for some time, for some network issues, some latency issues, some outrage, then when the system is up again, the pod is up again, that means it was an intermittent failure or the temporary failure. Then retry after a short delay can resolve the issue. But make sure you do not keep on retrying hundreds and hundreds of times. That will even slow down your process. For the real-time example, imagine you are trying to make a phone call, but the line is temporarily bad or the call is failing. Instead of hanging up immediately, you try calling after short time and eventually the call goes along. So in this system, sometimes a failure is just temporary, just like a service being temporarily slow or unavailable or pod is down. So rather than giving up on the first failure itself, you can do the Spring retry, which automatically tries to make a request again after a brief delay. If the retry for a few times is fine, and we hope that it will be fine, but if it doesn't, we will stop then and there. This approach works very well with intermittent issues where retry could succeed after short delays. For example, if your payment service pod is down right now, the pod might come up after some delay. So the request will retry up to 3 times with a 2 seconds delay. So we're expecting the pod to get up after 6 or 8 seconds of delay. That's how retry works. How do you implement it? Using Spring retry, using @retryable. Over this particular class, you have maximum 3 attempts, and this is the exponential backoff with a delay of 2 milliseconds or 2 seconds. The third option is you can set timeout to avoid blocking the request. So suppose if your B microservice is unresponsive, your request may hang indefinitely. And even though your response from A is success, since a B is a blocker or the bottleneck, A will also not able to give response back to client because it is stuck by B. So timeouts ensures that the failing service do not slow down the entire system. So even though A was perfectly fine, it was slowed down in giving response to client because of microservice B. So you can always set the timeout, connection timeouts like this. So whenever you create a HTTP component or the client request factory, basically this is just a configuration. You can always configure your REST API clients or the HTTP request to have the timeouts, the read and connection timeouts. So in the real time, for example, you're waiting in a coffee shop and the barista is taking too long to make your coffee. So rather getting late to your office or getting late for your bus and delaying everything in your ongoing day, you can rather just drop it off and walk away. So this is how one service, if takes too long, you should not slow down everything. Timeouts are just like setting a waiting time limit. If the service does not respond in that time, you just move on. This prevents other systems from getting stuck and you having a better performance. So if the service does not respond in 5 seconds, the request is aborted. This is the very important thing. You can implement the fallback mechanism. This you always do with the first part. So in the first part only, we have implemented a fallback mechanism like this, right? With a circuit breaker. So what is this fallback mechanism? When a service fails, a default response or the cached response is sent successfully back to the client. For example, client was calling A was calling B. If B is failing and even though after multiple retries it is not coming up, you can get to the fallback method and say, sorry, order service is right now down. I cannot place your order, but you can go along, add things to your cart. Once the order service is down, please come back and give an order again. Sorry for the delay. I'll give you some real-time example, okay? Suppose you're using a weather app to see what is the weather today and tomorrow. It fetches the current temperature from the external web microservice. If that microservice goes down, so instead of showing an error on the app saying that, sorry, our app service is down, there is no weather condition update for you at the moment. This is such a bad user experience for the weather app. So rather than that, if you have anything which is known like 10 minutes back, 20 minutes back, 1 hour back, you can store that in the cache and get that from the cache and show as the last known weather report rather than showing the service unavailable. For example, the last known report was 2 hours back saying it is sunny today at 24 degrees Celsius. So even if your app fails at this particular point of time, you can show the thing which is in the cache 2 hours back. That is 24 degrees Celsius and sunny instead of displaying an error or the blank screen to the user. This will exaggerate your user experience, will not give a bad performance. So this is how user gets a helpful up to day-to-day temperature readings. So that's this real-time example. So you can store the recent successful response in the cache, for example Redis, and serve them when the service is down. This can only be done where real-time data need is not there. For example, if you need to show the inventory, you cannot do that, because if you can show 2 hour old data that you have 10 inventory for this mobile, it might not be the right thing, because you might get the 10 mobile order and you will go out of inventory if the data is not up to date, and in these 2 hours 2 or 3 mobiles goes out for the sale. So for the caching, you can use Redis here. The fifth part, which is not usually the always possible part, is you can use asynchronous processing. You can move from synchronous to async calls, for example not using the REST APIs and using rather Kafka's RabbitMQs, ActiveMQs. This is not always possible. For example, you cannot take payments asynchronously from the users just by giving an UI that order plays successfully. You cannot do that. The payments should be in a synchronous manner. But if you are using REST APIs to give notifications to the user that your order has been placed successfully and this is the data in your cart, this is the products in your cart, you can do that in the asynchronous way using Kafkas and topics. So in the real time, suppose you are signing up for the new account, normally you fill in your details like create account and send email confirmation on the user account created. If your email service is down, why should you stop user from making the registration? You can send the email later on that yes, you have successfully registered to this XYZ website. So rather than giving a call from register microservice to email microservice or notification microservice, you can make it asynchronous. So these are key solutions, tools for the particular scenario. So if you have multiple microservices communicating synchronously via REST, how would you handle failure? So it depends on the type of failure. If the failure is temporarily, then you can retry with proper exponential backoff. If the service is slow or unresponsive, you can use the timeouts to prevent the further blocking. But if the service is down for a very long time, you should use circuit breaker to stop the calls. What if the service fails but data is seriously needed? It is something which you have to give, even though with some old data is also fine. You can use cache like Redis to give the fallback response. And if there is a possibility to avoid cascading failures, you can move to asynchronous communication. This is very much corner case, only and only if it is possible, then only you can go to this particular solution. So usually the circuit breaker with proper timeouts, retry and fallback, these all the four things are to be done whenever you are using the REST API calls to prevent the whole system failure because of one bottleneck. And what are the tools? For retry, you can use Spring Retry. For circuit breaker, you can use Resilience 4J. For timeouts, you can use REST template configurations that I've shown you, right? Connection timeout and read timeout. For cache and fallback responses, you can use the mix and match of Redis and Resilience 4J. For asynchronous communication, you can always go for ActiveMQ, RabbitMQ, Kafka. So in conclusion, to handle failures in this REST API based microservice architecture, you should use circuit breaker to prevent the repeated calls. You should also implement the retry for temporary failures, set timeouts to avoid blocking the whole request chain, use fallback mechanisms and cache for missing data. Or if there is the non-critical request, then you can think of moving to asynchronous communication. So that's how you manage your system in the REST-based synchronous calls. There is a second scenario. This is a very interesting scenario, okay? You have an e-commerce application with order service and the payment service and inventory service. So basically three services, okay? What are those? Order service, inventory service, payment service. Now suppose you are placing an order, but order should be successful only if both the payment and inventory are updated successfully. Otherwise, you have to cancel the order. How would you make sure that only if payment is done and inventory is updated, then only order is successful? This is a distributed transaction scenario, okay? So ensuring that the order is placed only if both are successful requires a strategy for distributed transactions and data consistency. The best way to handle it is through Saga design pattern. The Saga consists of two approaches, choreography and orchestrator. Orchestrator is a central conductor. Basically, this is the central place which controls the every flow. For example, I'll give an example through this, okay? So it starts the registration of user, register successfully. Now it is the orchestrator who gives the command to inventory service to check the inventory. If the inventory is available, then it asks for the payment from the user. If the payment is successful, it's the orchestrator task to arrange the shipment. If the shipment is confirmed, it's the task of the orchestrator to give the response acknowledgement back that yes, your order is placed successfully. Or if inventory is not available, you have to notify the user that you are out of stock and say, sorry, your order is cancelled, either because your payment was not successful or we are out of stock. So in this particular case, the orchestrator tell each service what to do and in what order. For example, orchestrator first calls inventory service, then payment service, then shipping service. So it's the central place where everything happens. So if any service fails, the process can be stopped or retried by the orchestrator because he is the coordinator. Also, this is the single centralized control for the whole logic and implementation of workflow. So any retries and errors are handled by the orchestrator. And when it comes to choreography, it is quite decentralized. Let's understand that with this example. There is no orchestrator here. If you can see, this was the pink one was orchestrator. Since there is no orchestrator, there is nobody to handle these communications. So who has to manage it? It's all these services who internally handles it. So the payment services makes the event say payment completed, which will be listened by both the shipping service and the inventory service. So if the payment is completed, you can process the shipping and update the inventory. Else, the compensating transactions comes into picture. So the compensating events will also flow through this event bus. Let's understand this. In the choreography, it's a decentralized approach. No central controller or the guiding service is there. Each service will listen to each event from other microservices that triggers their own action. For example, if the payment is completed, it publishes payment completed event. which will be listened by the shipping and the inventory service. Since there is no central controller, no central orchestrator, each service knows its role and how do they want to react to each message or the event. So services are aware that they have to listen through the Kafka or the event bus, and they don't need any central authority to guide them. This gives a good loosely coupled microservices. Reason being, the shipping microservice needs to know that the payment completed event has to be listened by me, and when that occurs, I should react. So each individual services has the independent execution, and they know their own responsibility and task, and they can operate individually. And here is the difference between orchestrator and choreography design pattern. The control here in the orchestrator is centralized while it is decentralized. Here the communication flow is one service tells all other service what to do, and that service is orchestrator who tells all other microservices what they do. While in the case of choreography, each service listens for the event in the event bus, and they know what to react and how to react on that particular event. So it's mostly to the event driven architecture. While the case of failure handling, the centralized failure is managed by orchestrator, all the retries and errors, while in case of choreography, each service handles their own errors. Dependencies, one service depends upon the orchestrator. There's a very high and single point of failure for the orchestrator. When it comes to choreography, it's loosely coupled. There's no dependency on any of the single orchestrator. Scalability is a problem because of the central orchestrator. Here it is more scalable. So they both have their advantages and disadvantages. So this is one of the way how you can handle the situation where you have both payment and inventory to be updated before the order is confirmed. The second way is use the out of box pattern, where out of box pattern makes sure that the order is not placed until and unless your payment microservice and inventory microservice does not give you the right result. So it's just like a safety net, which makes sure that your order event is sent out only after all the tasks are completed successfully, that is inventory and payment is done successfully. This avoids any situation where your something gets lost. That means your order does not get placed and does not cause any inconsistency, that if the payment is not done or you don't have inventory, still the order is placed successfully. That doesn't happen with the outbox pattern. And now what is outbox pattern? Going into the theoretical way, let's understand with the real-time scenario. Imagine you are at a restaurant, you are placing an order. Your waiter comes down to you, write the order in his notebook, that is in our case a database, but before your order reaches to the kitchen, the waiter has the secret folder or called as outbox table. So in the outbox design pattern, you have a centralized outbox table where all the events are registered. Now coming to a real time, whenever the waiter writes its order details into a notebook, it also simultaneously write it to one of the outbox table or the secret folder, where they record each order and event within the same transaction. So just in case something goes wrong, for example, when you place an order, waiter write it down in its notebook and immediately to its outbox table, saying order is placed, need to be sent to kitchen. This is an event. Order is placed, sent to the kitchen. The second person, for example, the cook, looks at the secret folder or the outbox table and sees that order is listed and has to be delivered by the kitchen. If anything goes wrong, for example, the cook forgets to give the order, the outbox table still have the backup, and you can retry by giving order back to the kitchen without worrying what happened. Was the order given to the customer and they ate it up, or it is not even served to them? So that recent update of the event is stored in the outbox table. So outbox table is a special table that stores event like order created but not served, order served hot, order completed, got a good feedback. These kinds of events are stored in the outbox table. That needs to be sent to other services, for example, the cook service or the waitering service, or in our case, payment or the inventory service. There is a background worker or the Debezium who checks this table regularly and sends the right event to the right service through Kafka. If the system crashes, the event is still safe in the outbox table, so system can retry without any failure, like seeing this was the last update that order was placed but was not served. So it's given again to the kitchen and served hot to the users. Why is it useful? Because it makes sure that your order is not placed until your inventory and payment service is not done. So it makes sure if anything goes wrong, system can still retry and won't lose the data because of their existing outbox table. Also, it ensures the event is done only once and is sent only once. It is not duplicated, because if the database contains or the outbox table contains the order is served hot, you should not create the order, give it to kitchen and serve them again. So that is the prevention. There is exactly one delivery of order to the consumer. So you can create the outbox table with the event type, event data and status. This Debezium or the another tool listens for this table and sends the event for Kafka for further processing. What is the advantage? It prevents no event loss, also prevents the consistency. What is the problem? There is a separate process called as Debezium or other tool has to listen to your outbox table to regularize your events in the system. Now, this was the two-way to handling that order is not placed until your payment and inventory is successful. First was Saga, second was this outbox pattern. There is third not recommended pattern, that is trying to go towards asset principle in a distributed transaction. In the distributed transactions, you cannot maintain the asset properties that nicely. The options for this asset property management is the 2 PCs and 3 PCs, prepare and commit phases. That's where the problem rise, because this is trying to become asset but will not be able to at the end. So I'm not going to discuss this. It's not recommended. If it is really required, then use it. Otherwise, always go for sagas. Fourth is use idempotency to prevent duplicate orders. This is anyways you have to do. So if there's a retry mechanism, it might cause duplicate orders. So to prevent that, you can use idempotency key and see if the transaction is present already there, then don't do it. There is a dead letter queue. This is a very beautiful concept when it comes to anything, Kafka's or RabbitMQs. They both have the dead letter queues. But what is dead letter queues? Let's understand that first, okay? So if the payment is not done and it is failing, it should be moved to dead letter queue for later processing. What is a dead letter queue? Dead letter queue is just a specialized queue where the messages that have failed the multiple processing attempts are sent. For example, you're trying multiple times because you have implemented retry. You tried 3 times, but still you're failing, not able to connect to the pod successfully. That message is then sent to the dead letter queue. That prevents the message loss and allows the troubleshooting, debugging, and later on doing the manual retry. How does this dead letter queue works? For example, there is a payment event which has to be done. The payment event is then picked up by the main queue. It gives you the UI that please do the payment if you want your order to be done. It tries, if it is failing due to database issue, API failure, a bug, or the network issue, latency issue. For that n number of time, OTP is not received by the consumer by any case. If it is trying by 3 times, 4 times, typically the maximum retry is 3 times. If it is not done and still you are failing to get the payment, but still you are still trying to get your order successful, you can give that attempt to the dead letter queue. If the message still fails to retry, it is moved to dead letter queue instead of being discarded, and the dead letter queue is a separate queue from the main queue, which holds only the failed messages. So what you can do is, hey man, you were trying to place an order, but you were not able to do the payment. Now is the time. If you have the proper bank accounts with you, you can do the retry and you can place an order. This gives a better user experience. So you can monitor the dead letter queue for the orders which are failed in the payments. You can remind them that this is still in your cart, do the payment and get your cart done. So messages in the dead letter queue can later be inspected, fixed, manually retried by giving them notifications that your order is still stuck. Please do the payment, otherwise your order will be cancelled. And there is a way to handle the dead letter queues. In RabbitMQ, this is how you create the dead letter queues, exchanges. They are called as exchanges. And in Kafka, you can create a separate topic named as dead letter queue with these particular replication factor, these particular retention milliseconds and the partitions. So final solution for you is, always when you have a situation where your order has to be placed only when inventory and payment service is done, basically a distributed transaction is the scenario here, always go for Saga design pattern. Also, if you should always prevent the duplicate orders, that it's otherwise you will end up having the loss in the business. So use the Redis locks and the idempotency keys. Avoid partial failures using outbox pattern and retry with backoff, and prevent the message loss with dead letter queues. Best approach is all these things. Now there's a third scenario. Your application exposes multiple microservices to outside world. How would you ensure these things? Security, rate limiting, and request validation at the entry point itself. Understand this tricky question, okay? You can implement security at microservice level also, but it says at entry point. So there's an Angular or the reactive application. It is giving a call to your backend. And your backend consists of multiple microservices. You need to ensure security at the gate where your microservices starts. And that gate is nothing but the API gateway. So you can always, in this situation, you can always implement security, also the rate limiting and request validation at the API gateway level. We will see how, okay? But how it is good? If you initially stop the hackers or the unauthorized users, you don't have to navigate to multiple microservices. Also, what is rate limiting? When you bombard a particular website with thousands of requests, its pod might crash, its latency might go bad, the performance might go very bad. So rate limiting is to prevent your system from bombarding of unnecessary requests that you cannot handle at a particular point of time. Also, request validation, if I keep hitting a particular microservice with wrong or the bad request, I keep on getting 400 bad requests. Still, I'm giving a call multiple times with the 400 bad request. If it goes to multiple microservices, that will be of no use. So request validation at the entry point is very good. So how would you implement these three at the entry point, that is at API gateway level? So you can just use the authentication at API gateway level by implementing the cloud level, this API gateway level security with JWT tokens. You can use Bucket4j to throttle the request based on IP or users. That is basically the rate limiting. So this is the Redis who is going to prevent your system from burst of request. This sets up Redis rate limiter to replenish the rate of 10 requests per second and burst capacity of 20 requests. That means at a normal time, I can handle 10 requests per second. At the most, I can manage 20, but no more. So this is the replenish rate. This is the burst capacity. After that, I'll break. So how does this work? A user sends the API request. Redis keeps the track of how many requests that particular user or that IP address has made to the system. If it exceeds 10 seconds and 20 is the max, all the new requests coming from that user and IP is blocked. This ensures the system is not overloaded and you are not the bad person who is trying to just make the system down. How would you implement it? Just implement Redis in the particular gateway and implement the following filters. So this is how you filter out with Redis. The third is the request validations. You can validate all the incoming requests using the Spring validations with @valid, not null, and all the kind of interceptors in Spring Boot. For example, for the request which is coming for the username, it should not be null. Its minimum size and maximum size is this. Your email address should also be not null and it should be a proper valid email address. And in the request, you can say @valid like this. And you can implement the validations in all these particular format. So the complete gateway will look something like this, where you have the user service as the route. So these are the API gateway routes for the user service. For any path which is coming with /users, please redirect me to the load balanced user service. Since it is load balanced, they might have multiple instances. But for each IP or user, please rate limit to 10 or maximum 20. And use authentication filters, that is JWT authentication filter for security and the request validation filter for input which is valid. So this is how you can implement the whole flow. So at the API gateway, you can implement JWT authentication to validate only the users who have access to your microservice, rate limit and prevent them from abusing you, and validate all the requests coming in. So that was API level gateway microservice communications with your backends. But how would you secure your inter-service communication in microservice architecture? So suppose you have A, B, and C. Again, order microservice, inventory microservice, and payment microservice. the request coming from front end, you have made the security validations and everything. How would still your order and payment will validate each other? There can be a case that another person saying that payment is done, you can place the order. That might be a hacker or the unauthorized user. So how does these two internal microservice should secure each other? Though you have implemented at API gateway level, but still inter-service communication should be secured. So when security is applied at API gateway level for external request, still securing your inter-service communication within microservice architecture is a different approach. Since it handles all the external traffic, your internal traffic still needs to be secured. The first and very normally used method is mutual service to service authentication. That is when both the A and B order microservice and the payment and inventory microservice each other communicates with each other by providing their identity that yes, I am authorized to access you and you are authorized to access me. This is too much of theory. Let's understand with a real-time example. This is a very funny example, but it made me understand at once what mutual TLS is. So for the mutual TLS, for example, you are entering a very high security office where you and security guard, they both has to verify each other. This is very funny. But again, one-way authentication is, this is a normal TLS. That is, you show your ID card to security guard checks your ID card, lets you in. You do not verify whether the guard who is checking you is a legitimate guard. So this is single and standard way how SSL TLS work. For example, you verify in the browser that you are not a robot or the AI. You basically does not verify whether website is legitimate or not. But when it comes to mutual TLS, which is done in our case, where are two microservices connected with each other. You show your ID card to the guard. The ID card is also shown by security guard to you. So security guard also shows his ID card to you to show that yes, I'm a genuine security guard who is allowing you inside and I am authorized to view your personal details on your ID card. So you both confirm each other's identity before getting, and you get the mutual trust with the party and you get inside. So this is how mutual TLS work. But this is in the computer world, the computer talking to each other. It ensures both services verify each other. So how does this work? Client A sends request to B presents its TLS certificate, A also presents its certificate. They both validate the secure connection and the connection is done. This prevents the fraud. How do you enable it? Using OpenSSL, you create your certificate for A, you create a certificate for B, and then you share each other with the trust store. The second is a very common way. You can use Auth2. Though you have implemented at gateway level, you can implement that also at the service level using multiple identity providers like Okta, Cloak, Keycloak, or Auth0. The third is a service mesh. Now, who is a service mesh? It is a dedicated infrastructure layer to handle service to service communication. This issue that you're facing is not an uncommon issue that only you are facing. Everybody in the world faces multiple microservice intercommunication security. So that is done by ETIOS or service mesh. Now, what is service mesh in a very simple term? Okay. Suppose you are having a delivery network, Swiggy or Zomato. You have multiple restaurants, which are basically your microservices. You have the delivery agent or the ITOS or the service mesh. Now, consumers or the users don't directly talk to your restaurants, but they rely on the delivery agents to give their order correctly at their place. Similarly, in microservices do not talk to each other directly. They communicate through a service mesh like ITOS or Linkdot, which acts as a delivery network managing how services communicate with each other. The fourth way is through API gateway. All the requests going from A to B will be navigated via gateway. That can also be done. Or you can share an API key like shared secrets, which A sends the secret in the headers, B also send the secret in the headers, and they can mutually enable it. So mutual TLS, that is you authenticating guard also authenticating himself with you. JWT, which is also implemented at API gateway. Service mesh, a complete separate infrastructure, and all your requests goes through service mesh. API gateway, again, you do not talk A to B directly. You talk through the API gateway, or you share the keys in the headers to validate yourself that you are the correct person, he is the correct person. I have many more questions to cover. For example, the user service and have their own database. How do you join those two different databases? Very common question. Then a lot more things I have to cover. Let me know if you need second part for this scenario-based interview questions for microservices. Thank you.